Good evening, ladies. This has been a rich and at times unsettling journey as we have wrestled with the reality of being in relationship with a God who sometimes is silent and who sometimes seems absent. And so, for this follow up to week 4, I want to call this presentation Silence, Absence, and Staying in the Conversation. And I want to start by giving attention to the words of three people, three scholars, pastors from across the church, who have spoken to these matters of the silence of God and the absence of God, and what it means for the people of God to stay in relationship in the midst of those things. Walter Brueggemann, who is an Old Testament scholar, has said on various occasions that one of the central realities of Israel's relationship to Yahweh was that Israel had to deal with Yahweh in the silences of Yahweh as much as in his speaking. And Eugene Peterson, who is the translator of the Message paraphrase, picks up on that insight from Brueggemann. And you can see this quoted in Pete's book if you have it on page 197. Peterson says this in his book, Christ Plays in 10,000 Places. The story in which God does his saving work, the big story, arises among a people whose primary experience of God is in his absence. Let me just say that again. The story, our story, in which God does his saving work, arises among a people whose primary experience of God is in his absence. Silence. Absence. And then if we go back to the beginning of our Protestant tradition, Martin Luther talked about God as the absconditus Deus, the God who goes missing. And that encompasses both silence and absence. Silence of God, the absence of God. Those are painful, but they can also be redemptive. And it is the cross of Jesus that shows us in visible, palpable form the other side of the silence and the other side of the absence. It shows us the redemptive power of God's accompanying presence when he says no words and when he hides himself behind the veil. And so this brings us to our part when God is silent and when God seems absent. The cry that comes rushing out of our hearts is, God, why have you abandoned us? And thanks be to God, he has given us a small glimpse of what the other side of that conversation looks like. When God is silent, when God seems absent, our conversations with him can seem one-sided. And all we hear is our own cry, why? Why have you abandoned us? But in the book of Isaiah, chapter 49, we find a little glimpse of God's side of that conversation. So let's look at Isaiah 49, beginning with verse 14. This is us talking. This is our side of the conversation. Zion, that is the people of God, says, The Lord has abandoned me. The Lord has forgotten me. That's what it feels like for us to be on this side of the conversation. Abandoned, forgotten. But then God gives us this beautiful peek into what he's experiencing on the other side of the conversation. Verse 15. Can a woman forget her nursing child or lack compassion for the child of her womb? And the answer we expect to that question is no, of course not. But then God says, even if the unthinkable were to happen and that mother would forget her child, yet, God says, I will not forget you. Look, I have inscribed you on the palm of my hands. Your walls are continually before me. Even in the silence, whatever God's redemptive purpose for that silence is, he is still there. He is still present, and we are still on his heart. Our heart cry is, God, where are you? Why have you abandoned me? God's heart cry is, here you are, tattooed, engraved on the palm of my hand and held close to my heart. That is what makes it possible for us to stay in the conversation. When God is silent, when we can't see him, when he seems absent, we have this confidence that on the other side of this seeming silence and this seeming absence is a God who yearns over us and who has us graven on his hands. We see the scars of Jesus from the cross carried into eternity. Have you thought about that? That when Jesus ascended into the presence of his Father in his gloriously resurrected body, that body still bore the scars of the cross. In his resurrected body, he said to the disciples, look at my hands and my feet. Look at my side. Jesus took the scars of the cross into the presence of the Father. And for all eternity, he says, look, you are graven on my hands. I pray that that will bring comfort and encouragement and perseverance to you if you find yourself in one of those seasons when God is silent and when he seems to be absent. God bless you.